But I'm also thinking of a range of other technologies, quantum, biotech, advanced manufacturing, that are going to have profound impacts on our economies. And it has felt like this technological transformation has been long heralded, but never quite arrived. Well, it seems to me that a series of innovations, the always online world, big data, powerful computing, machine learning, accumulating in ways that are going to tip over into a dislocation that is new and altogether different. The game is about to change because we are on the cusp of an explosion in the application of AI, a technology that will have an impact across the whole economy, not just in one or two sectors, a technology that will transform the way that we work, the way that we study, and the way that we entertain ourselves, a technology that will force governments to think in entirely different ways about how they deliver public services and secure their nations. And certainly this presents risks that will need to be managed. For example, militaries are already using AI, which means the international community is going to need to develop new norms about how this is done in a way that ensures compliance with the rules of war and also ensures human responsibility in conflict. But my message is that while we need to manage that change, we cannot allow ourselves to be paralysed by the risks. For those who believe that they can outcompete through this period of technological disruption and dislocation, the opportunities are there. The citizens, the companies, and the countries that embrace the coming change will be the ones that reap the dividends. Yet there's also no doubt that there are fundamental trend lines in the Indo-Pacific that present geostrategic risks to both growth and prosperity. And these have long-term drivers that are not going away and have been amplified by recent events. Past assumptions that underpin the previous generation's geopolitical calculations are being totally upended. A fortnight ago, the Singaporean Foreign Minister, Vivian Balakrishnan, put this change very eloquently when he said, "The world is now shifting from unipolarity to multipolarity, from free trade to protectionism, from multilateralism to unilateralism, from globalization to hypernationalism, from openness to xenophobia, and from optimism to anxiety." This is a global change, not isolated to one region. And certainly though we live today in an Indo-Pacific navigating contest and rivalry with a period of strategic uncertainty, I think there are three big shifts that make for challenging times for all of us ahead. The first is that we are seeing rules giving way to power. Previously, we could count on countries respecting the UN Charter, the law of the sea, and world trade rules. That sadly cannot be assumed in an age of sharper competition. And instead, we risk dangerous miscalculation at flashpoints, and these range from the militarization of disputed reefs to dangerous air movements, from land border incursions to breakout nuclear capabilities. And of course, it's not just flashpoints, but a slow shift in Indo-Pacific realities that change calculations. Recent demonstrations of naval force near New Zealand's maritime surrounds, for example, sent a signal that alarmed many of my fellow citizens. Second, we are witnessing a shift from economics to security. Because after the Cold War, the dominant paradigm in relations between Indo-Pacific countries was a sustained effort to raise the material living standards by tending to our economies. And make no mistake, bread and butter issues still loom very, very large and are a priority for governments all around the region. And indeed, economic growth is my government's highest priority too. But across the Indo-Pacific, we also see governments dedicating increased attention and resource to military modernisation. Military build-ups reflect a need to prepare against uncertainty and against insecurity. And some military build-ups, however, are underway without the reassurance that that transparency brings. National security demands are expanding. Governments need to protect their people and assets against foreign interference, cyber attacks and terrorism. In the last few months, a new threat has emerged with damage to critical infrastructure like subsea cables. Well, you can't have prosperity without security, not least when the tools of commerce themselves require protection. The third big geo-economic shift, as I see it, is from efficiency to resilience. Where previously Indo-Pacific economies saw even deeper interdependence as a dynamo for growth, that can no longer be assumed in an age of decoupling. Onshoring, protectionism and trade wars are displacing best price, open markets and integrated supply chains. And so we find ourselves in a world that is growing more difficult and more complex, and especially so for smaller states. However, we must engage with the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. And so, like most countries across the region, New Zealand's strategic policy is being shaped by our assessment of these trends. We have agency to shape the Indo-Pacific that we all want, but we must do so with energy and with urgency. Ladies and gentlemen, as New Zealand looks to protect and advance our interests in the Indo-Pacific, we can only do so alongside partners like India that have a significant role to play in the Indo-Pacific region. In an increasingly multipolar world, India's size and geostrategic heft gives you autonomy. At the same time, your democratic partners in the Indo-Pacific offer you a force multiplier for our convergent interests. For at a time when democracy is in decline with less than half the world's adults electing their leaders, it truly is an inspiration that 650 million Indians turned out to vote last year in the largest election in history. Your national election is a triumph of logistics, but it's also a triumph of legitimacy. An election that means your leaders serve their people rather than your people serving their leaders. Now, I don't advocate arbitrary divisions between democracies and autocracies, and just because we are democracies, we won't always see eye to eye. Nonetheless, there's truth in the fact that our democratic governance means that we share a belief in the freedom to choose, giving everyone a voice and respect for the rules. Our interests increasingly converge around seeing three ideas as an aligned set of organising principles for our Indo-Pacific region. And the first is that we want to live in an Indo-Pacific where countries are free to choose their own path, free from interference. A region where no one country comes to dominate. And it is a sign of the times that I have to stand here defending respect for sovereignty, yet New Zealand's approach is increasingly shaped around that objective. Just on Saturday, I joined a call led by Prime Minister Starmer focused on what more those contributing to Ukraine's defence can do to support a just and lasting peace, to help a country whose sovereignty and territorial integrity has been so flagrantly attacked. And in my own home region, our fellow Pacific neighbours are navigating geostrategic dynamics that are their sharpest in nearly 80 years. And in a deeply contested world, Pacific partners are being asked to make choices that may undermine their national sovereignty. They risk falling into over-indebtedness. They must make choices about dual-use infrastructure, and they face pressure to enter new security arrangements. New Zealand invests in working alongside Pacific countries to boost their capacity to make independent choices free from interference. Yet size alone cannot inoculate a country from these dynamics. Building strong and diversified relationships is the key to mitigating the risk of dependence on a few. And that is why my government is investing in our key relationships, from traditional partners to thickening and deepening our relationships across Southeast Asia, and in a serious way with India too. And we have a responsibility to invest in our own security as a down payment on our future ability to choose our own path. And that is why New Zealand will be scaling up and doing more to support our own defence. We plan to better resource and equip our defence force to ensure that we can continue to defend our interests, whether in our near region, in our alliance with Australia, or in support of collective security efforts with partners like India. Alongside this investment in capability, we're making tangible contributions across the Indo-Pacific. When I was in Japan last year, for example, I saw firsthand the work of our aviators and what they do to detect and deter North Korea's sanctions-busting activities. The New Zealand Navy is leading Combined Task Force 150, responsible for multinational activities to protect trade routes and counter smuggling, piracy and terrorism in the Indian Ocean and Gulf of Aden. We are fortunate indeed that India has agreed to take up the deputy command. And underlining these naval connections, one of our frigates, Takaha, is in Mumbai later this week. But as we seek an Indo-Pacific in which countries are free to choose their own path, I'm determined that New Zealand plays its role, whether through our work with Pacific Island partners, our relationship in the Indo-Pacific, or through our own defence efforts. Now, the second principle both India and New Zealand subscribe to is the criticality of Indo-Pacific regional institutions, even as these evolve. Regional architecture scaffolds our region's security and its prosperity. ASEAN continues to promote regional peace and economic development through its convening power and its centrality. It also provides a place for the region's players to come together to discuss strategic issues. ASEAN sits at the centre of the East Asia Summit, which for 20 years now has enabled political dialogue across the region, a forum that builds understanding, like this one, that reduces the risk of miscalculation and contributes to strategic trust. Yet the Indo-Pacific architecture is not static as it adapts to new realities, and many-lateral groupings are important new pieces of the puzzle. The Quad has emerged as an important vehicle promoting an open, stable and prosperous Indo-Pacific region. And India's contribution to that evolution, of course, has been vital. And while New Zealand has no pretensions to Quad membership, we stand ready to work with you to advance Quad initiatives. We ourselves are strengthening our work with Japan and the Republic of Korea, as well as Australia. And last year I convened the Indo-Pacific Four to discuss Ukraine and North Korea. And with serious headwinds buffeting the global trade system, New Zealand has seriously invested in Indo-Pacific trade and economic integration groupings. From the CPTPP, the gold standard of FTAs internationally, through to the RCEP, perhaps the world's most inclusive agreement. And we welcome India's engagement in the regional economic architecture with our work together in the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, important in an area in which we seek to build one another's resilience. And the third Indo-Pacific principle that we align around is a region in which respect for the rules is foundational. Globally, rules are being undermined, whether those around territorial integrity, freedom of navigation, or laws of war. Yet these are the very rules that preserve an Indo-Pacific order that is not might is right alone. And as I've said before, there is no prosperity without security. The rules that underpin our security also allow our businesses to operate with great certainty, and those rules deliver daily in meaningful ways for our people and our populations. For example, 1 in 4 jobs in New Zealand rely on exports, and our exporting businesses being able to depend on the predictability that those rules deliver. And in a miracle that's only possible thanks to globally accepted aviation standards, 120,000 flights carry 12 million passengers and operate safely between their destinations each and every day. These rules shape the character of our region. And we must remain committed to this rules-based system, even while acknowledging its very shortcomings. And it is a truism that the world of 2025 is vastly different from 1945, and our global institutions sadly have been way too slow to adapt. So we're not talking about starting over by remaking the global order. Instead, I tend to agree with Dr. Jaishankar when he says that we want an order in which change is evolutionary at a pace that is comfortable and steady. And that's why New Zealand supports reforming global governance frameworks to better reflect today's realities. Rather than casting them aside, they should give greater voice to the developing world and underrepresented regions. Countries like India, that plays such a central role in the global community, should have a seat at the table. And we've therefore long advocated and supported India having a permanent seat on a reformed UN Security Council. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it has been truly a privilege to speak with you today at this important forum for global dialogue. The geostrategic picture I've painted is quite stark. Rules are giving way to power, economics to security, and efficiency to resilience. And the tectonic shifts unfolding highlight that we, working alongside partners and friends, must navigate disruption, uncertainty, and sharpening pressure on our national interests. Yet we will not be overwhelmed by complexity and challenge. We must go forward with great confidence. We live at the heart of the world's most exciting and dynamic region, the Indo-Pacific. We live in an era of technological transformation that offers outsized opportunities. And we are countries with solid underlying democratic institutions which will underpin our society's future success. India and New Zealand have extraordinarily talented people, and both our countries have a clear plan that reflects and reinforces the connections between our security and our prosperity. We cannot afford to be thrown by the rapid pace of change. We must grapple with shifting realities and capitalise on these for all of our people's benefits. We will create and seize opportunities. We will invest in our capabilities. This is our region, and its future will be shaped by the choices that we all make together. Thank you, ngā mihi nui, and dhanyavad. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister, and a special thank you for not reminding us of the Test match series in October last year. With that, let me now request Dr. Jaishankar, the Foreign Minister of India, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good evening. It's my privilege to deliver the vote of thanks that will conclude the Raisina Dialogue's inauguration this evening. First, let me thank the chief guest, Prime Minister the Right Honourable Christopher Luxon of New Zealand. As all of you can see, he not only has considerable knowledge of India, but a real commitment to advance our ties. His perspectives on the Indo-Pacific are particularly valuable at a time when the world is debating the nature of the global order. To Prime Minister Narendra Modi, I would reiterate our deep appreciation for his vision and motivation that has driven the Raisina Dialogue. As we begin its 10th edition, I hope that we have lived up to his expectations of India hosting a world-class gathering. To the ORI, I can only restate how much the Ministry of External Affairs values our partnership, and we are glad to see it now expressed across different geographies. But most of all, to all of you, participants and delegates, the Raisina would not be what it has become without you. Please keep coming, please keep arguing, please keep listening. Ladies and gentlemen, the world order is clearly undergoing a great churn. This requires leadership, the kind that we have in the room today. It requires systems to think differently, not simply falling back on old assumptions to deal with new situations. And it requires honest conversations, fresh ideas, and creative solutions. The value proposition that Raisina offers in that regard is higher than ever. So I know I speak for all of you in saying, let the dialogue begin. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now remain seated as the VIPs exit the room. And just give us a little more of your time for this inauguration ceremony. We will have you out soon. You've been invited to specific dinners. Please attend those. Some have been invited to our gala opening dinner in the lawns outside. We look forward to receiving you there. But do allow the VIPs to leave the room.
तो आप सीधे दृश्य देख रहे थे रायसीना डायलॉग से। भारत का प्रमुख कूटनीतिक सम्मेलन रायसीना डायलॉग आज से शुरू हो गया है, जो 19 मार्च तक चलेगा। अपने आप में बेहद महत्वपूर्ण है। जो इसकी थीम है वो भी के सीधा प्रसारण देख रहे हैं।
I welcome you to this ceremony where we shall witness some new initiatives in India-New Zealand bilateral cooperation. These are by way of exchange of agreements, letters of intent, memorandums of understanding, memorandums of cooperation, followed by press statement by our two leaders. First, we shall witness the exchange of memorandum of cooperation in the field of sports between the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports, Government of India, and the Sports New Zealand of Government of New Zealand. This will be exchanged on the New Zealand side by Honourable Mark Michel, Minister for Ethnic Communities and Minister of Sports and Recreation, New Zealand, and Dr. S. Jaishankar, External Affairs Minister. Thank you, Ministers. We next have the exchange of memorandum on cooperation on horticulture between the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers' Welfare of India and the Ministry of Primary Industries of New Zealand. This will be exchanged on the New Zealand side by Honourable Todd McClay, Minister for Trade and Investment and Minister for Agriculture and Forestry, and on the Indian side by Shri Piyush Goyal, Minister for Commerce and Industry. Thank you, Ministers. I would request Minister McClay to continue. We next have the exchange of letter of intent on forestry between the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change of India, and the Ministry of Primary Industries of New Zealand. This will be exchanged on the New Zealand side by Minister Macleay and on the Indian side by Professor S.P. Baghel, Minister of Steel in Ministry of Forestry, Fisheries, Animal Husbandry and Dairying, and Ministry of Panchayati Raj. Thank you, Ministers. We next have the exchange of Memorandum of Understanding on Defence Cooperation between Ministry of Defence, Government of Republic of India, and New Zealand Ministry of Defence, New Zealand Defence Force. This will be exchanged on the New Zealand side by Rear Admiral Garen Golding, Chief of Navy, and on the Indian side by Shri Rajesh Kumar Singh, Defence Secretary. We next have the exchange of authorized economic operator mutual recognition agreement between the Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs of India and the New Zealand Customs Service. This will be exchanged on the New Zealand side by Ms. Christine Stevenson, Comptroller of New Zealand Customs Service, and on the Indian side by Shri Vikram Misri, Foreign Secretary. Last but not least, we have the exchange of education cooperation agreement between the Ministry of Education of Republic of India and the Ministry of Education of New Zealand. This will be exchanged on the New Zealand side by His Excellency Patrick Rata, High Commissioner of New Zealand to India, and on the Indian side by Shri Jaideep Majumdar, Secretary East, Ministry of External Affairs. Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the exchange ceremony. I now request spokesperson of Ministry of External Affairs to conduct the remainder of the proceedings.
Namaskar, good afternoon. The Right Honourable Christopher Luxon, Prime Minister of New Zealand, Honourable Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi, Honourable Ministers and members of both delegations, distinguished guests and friends from the media. We will now have the press statements. May I request Honourable Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi, to give his remarks to the media.
Your Excellency, प्रधानमंत्री लक्ष्मण, दोनों देशों के डेलीगेट्स, मीडिया के सभी साथी, नमस्कार। किया हो रहा। मैं प्रधानमंत्री लक्ष्मण और उनके प्रतिनिधिमंडल का भारत में हार्दिक स्वागत करता हूं। प्रधानमंत्री लक्ष्मण भारत से लंबे समय से जुड़े हुए हैं। कुछ दिन पहले ऑकलैंड में होली के रंगों में रंगकर उन्होंने जिस तरह उत्सव का माहौल बनाया, वह हम सब ने देखा। प्रधानमंत्री लक्ष्मण के न्यूजीलैंड में बसने वाले भारतीय मूल के लोगों के प्रति लगाव को इस बात से भी देखा जा सकता है कि उनके साथ एक बड़ा कम्युनिटी डेलीगेशन भी भारत आया है। उन जैसे युवा, ऊर्जावान और प्रतिभाशाली लीडर का इस वर्ष रायसीना डायलॉग का मुख्य अतिथि होना हमारे लिए खुशी की बात है। फ्रेंड्स, आज हमने अपने द्विपक्षीय संबंधों के विभिन्न पहलुओं पर विस्तृत चर्चा की। हमने अपनी रक्षा और सुरक्षा साझेदारी को मजबूत और संस्थागत रूप देने का निर्णय लिया है। जॉइंट एक्सरसाइज, ट्रेनिंग, पोर्ट विजिट्स के साथ साथ रक्षा उद्योग जगत में भी आपसी सहयोग के लिए रोड मैप बनाया जाएगा। हिंद महासागर में मैरीटाइम सिक्योरिटी के लिए कंबाइंड टास्क फोर्स 150 में हमारी नौसेनाएं मिलकर काम कर रही है और हमें प्रसन्नता है कि न्यूजीलैंड की नौसेना का जहाज 2 दिन में मुंबई में पोर्ट कॉल कर रहा है। फ्रेंड्स, दोनों देशों के बीच एक परस्पर लाभकारी फ्री ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट पर नेगोशिएशंस शुरू करने का निर्णय लिया गया है। इससे आपसी व्यापार और निवेश के पोटेंशियल को बढ़ावा मिलेगा। डेयरी, फूड प्रोसेसिंग और फार्मा जैसे क्षेत्रों में आपसी सहयोग और निवेश को प्रोत्साहित किया जाएगा। रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी और क्रिटिकल मिनरल क्षेत्रों में आपसी सहयोग को हमने प्राथमिकता दी है। फॉरेस्ट्री और हॉर्टिकल्चर में संयुक्त रूप से काम किया जाएगा। मुझे विश्वास है कि प्रधानमंत्री के साथ आए बड़े बिजनेस डेलीगेशन को भारत में नई संभावनाओं को देखने और समझने का अवसर मिलेगा। फ्रेंड्स, क्रिकेट हो, हॉकी या माउंटेनियरिंग, दोनों देशों के बीच खेलों में पुराने संबंध हैं। हमने स्पोर्ट्स में कोचिंग और खिलाड़ियों के एक्सचेंज के साथ साथ स्पोर्ट्स साइंस, साइकोलॉजी और मेडिसिन में भी सहयोग पर बल दिया है और वर्ष 2026 में दोनों देशों के बीच खेल संबंधों के 100 साल मनाने का निर्णय लिया गया है। फ्रेंड्स, न्यूजीलैंड में रहने वाला भारतीय समुदाय न्यूजीलैंड में सामाजिक और आर्थिक विकास में सकारात्मक योगदान दे रहा है। हमने तय किया है कि स्किल्ड वर्कर्स की मोबिलिटी, उसको सरल बनाने और इलीगल माइग्रेशन से निपटने के लिए एक समझौते पर तेजी से काम किया जाएगा। यूपीआई कनेक्टिविटी, डिजिटल ट्रांजैक्शन और टूरिज्म बढ़ाने पर भी बल दिया जाएगा। शिक्षा के क्षेत्र में हमारे पुराने संबंध हैं। हम न्यूजीलैंड की यूनिवर्सिटीज को भारत में कैंपस खोलने के लिए आमंत्रित करते हैं। फ्रेंड्स, आतंकवाद के खिलाफ हम दोनों एक मत हैं। चाहे 15 मार्च 2019 का क्राइस्ट चर्च आतंकी हमला हो या 26 नवंबर 2008 का मुंबई हमला, आतंकवाद किसी भी रूप में अस्वीकार्य है। आतंकी हमलों के दोषियों के खिलाफ कड़ी कार्रवाई आवश्यक है। आतंकवादी, अलगाववादी और कट्टरपंथी तत्वों के खिलाफ हम मिलकर सहयोग करते रहेंगे। इस संदर्भ में न्यूजीलैंड में कुछ गैर कानूनी तत्वों द्वारा भारत विरोधी गतिविधियों को लेकर हमने अपनी चिंता साझा की। हमें विश्वास है कि इन सभी गैर कानूनी तत्वों के खिलाफ हमें न्यूजीलैंड सरकार का सहयोग आगे भी मिलता रहेगा। फ्रेंड्स, फ्री, ओपन, सिक्योर और प्रॉस्परस इंडो पैसिफिक का हम दोनों समर्थन करते हैं। हम विकासवाद की नीति में विश्वास रखते हैं, विस्तारवाद में नहीं। इंडो पैसिफिक ओशन इनिशिएटिव से जुड़ने के लिए हम न्यूजीलैंड का स्वागत करते हैं। इंटरनेशनल सोलर अलायंस के बाद CDRI से जुड़ने के लिए भी हम न्यूजीलैंड का अभिनंदन करते हैं। फ्रेंड्स, अंत में रग्बी की भाषा में कहूं तो हम दोनों अपने संबंधों के उज्जवल भविष्य के लिए फ्रंट अप के लिए तैयार हैं। We are ready to step up together and take responsibility for a bright partnership. और मुझे विश्वास है कि हमारी साझेदारी दोनों देशों के लोगों के लिए एक मैच विनिंग पार्टनरशिप साबित होगी। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
Well said, well said. Thank you, sir. May I now request the Right Honourable Christopher Luxon, Prime Minister of New Zealand, to give his remarks to the media.
Well, namaste and kia ora, everybody. Can I just thank up front Prime Minister Modi for the very warm and generous welcome that we've had, myself and also our delegation. Today we have just concluded a series, I think, of very highly productive meetings, and we also witnessed, as you have seen, a number of government-to-government arrangements that will strengthen the growing ties between India and New Zealand. Prime Minister Modi and I have also issued a joint statement that I think captures the wide range of topics that we have discussed, the arrangements that we have finalised, and the areas of cooperation that we are determined to pursue into the future. I hope that our meeting has left Prime Minister Modi in no doubt about the profound depth of New Zealand's commitment to building a deep, broad-based and enduring relationship with the great nation of India. By broad-based, I mean that New Zealand is committed to doing more with India across a wide range of areas: defence and security, trade and economics, people-to-people ties, education, tourism, sports and culture. Our two-way trade today stands at around $3 billion New Zealand dollars a year, but there is huge potential to grow, and it is in that context that I want to say thank you, and I'm pleased to welcome the efforts of Minister Goyal and Minister Macleay on their agreement announced yesterday between New Zealand and India that we will launch immediately comprehensive free trade agreement negotiations, making sure that we work towards a balanced, ambitious and comprehensive agreement. The negotiations will expand opportunities for both our countries and our peoples, and we look forward to reaching a mutually beneficial agreement. On defence and security, Prime Minister Modi and I discussed the challenging strategic outlook in the Indo-Pacific region, and I reiterated New Zealand's strong commitment to working with India to address shared concerns over our respective interests and contributions to ensure a strong and stable and prosperous region. And that's a theme that I plan to pick up in my speech at the Raisina Dialogue this evening. And again, I feel incredibly privileged for the honour to be able to make that opening keynote address at this major international conference. The Prime Minister and I, as he alluded to, also discussed a number of practical areas where New Zealand and India are deepening our defence and our security cooperation. For example, in maritime security, the Royal New Zealand Navy currently leads the Combined Task Force 150, coordinating multinational efforts to protect trade routes and counter smuggling, piracy and terrorism in the Indian Ocean and the Gulf of Aden. We are working closely with India on this mission, and later this week the RNZ frigate Takaha will arrive in Mumbai. I was also pleased to witness the agreement of the new bilateral defence cooperation arrangement with India that reflects our ambition to enhance defence cooperation and adds an important new dimension to our strategic engagement. The Prime Minister and I have also announced that New Zealand will become a member of the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative. This initiative promises to drive deeper engagement between India and its regional partners. And the Prime Minister and I also discussed the deep links between our peoples. The depth and importance of these links, I think, are reflected in the delegation of proud Kiwi Indians that I have brought with me on this mission. They represent a community with achievements in every facet of life in New Zealand, from business to law, education, the media and sports. And of course, as the Prime Minister alluded to, sports is a shared passion between our two countries and our peoples. And it was definitely my pleasure just to witness the Sports Memorandum of Cooperation between New Zealand and India. That arrangement allows us to develop new ways to collaborate across high-performance sports, the exchange of programs and skills and technology and innovation, research and people. And in 2026, we will mark 100 years of sporting ties between our two countries, and it's entirely appropriate that we celebrate this milestone, including a visit by the Indian men's cricket team in November 2026. I have brought with me cricket greats Ross Taylor and Ajaz Patel, and that has been a way for us to celebrate and deepen the links between our two cricket-mad nations. And I do want to say to the Prime Minister, I really have appreciated him not raising the recent loss of New Zealand to India in the recent game that we played in Dubai. And I haven't mentioned any of the Test Series wins that we had on our recent trip to India either. So let's just keep it that way and we'll avoid a major diplomatic incident. The Prime Minister and I, as you know, have also witnessed an exchange of a number of arrangements that are going to deepen the economic, the cultural, the scientific and the people-to-people links between our countries. There's a mutual recognition agreement on customs, which you've just seen, a refresh of our cooperation agreement between our education ministries that identifies where New Zealand can actually help support the development of India's education sector, a letter of intent to cooperate more fully on forestry trade, and also a memorandum of cooperation on horticulture. And so to give effect to the various areas of new cooperation, my government has also confirmed that we will need more people on the ground in India. And that is why New Zealand is looking to increase our diplomatic footprint in India by more than 60%, underscoring our commitment to the relationship and our ambition to see it grow even further. And it is also my great pleasure to be able to announce Dr. Samir Saran, President of the Overseas Research Foundation and an organiser of the Raisina Dialogue with Dr. Jay Shankar, to be the next Prime Minister's Fellow from India. And I look forward to welcoming Dr. Saran to New Zealand and building even stronger engagement between New Zealand and India on critical issues facing the Indo-Pacific. So finally, can I just say again, thank you, Prime Minister Modi, for hosting me and my delegation so generously and with so much hospitality. We do look forward to broadening and deepening the relationship between our two great countries. And I also, of course, offered to reciprocate Prime Minister Modi's warm and generous hospitality by inviting him to New Zealand whenever his schedule makes that work. Namaste, and as we say in New Zealand, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora.
Thank you, sir. That concludes the press statement.